The heavy oak doors of Windsor Castle's private chapel swung shut with a dull thud, a sound that seemed to linger too long in the stone air. October 12, 2018. Outside, autumn rain lashed the ancient walls. Inside, candlelight moved across polished wood and centuries of carefully kept silence. The guests seated in those pews were not ordinary wedding attendees. They were the distilled product of centuries of tidal wealth and obligation, people trained from childhood to compose their expressions to reveal nothing. And yet even in that room, heads turned. Princess Eugenie of York walked slowly down the aisle in her silk gown. But the eyes in that chapel were not on her face. They were fixed on the object burning atop her head. A 93.7 carat cabochon emerald, roughly the size of a small bird's egg, sat at the center of a platinum Kokoshnik tiara. Flanked by rose-cut diamonds and cascading smaller emeralds, the stone seized the light and threw it back in cold, hypnotic green fire. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik had spent more than 70 years in velvet-lined darkness deep inside the royal vaults. Queen Elizabeth I had never placed it on her head in public. Not once. Her mother, the Queen Mother, had received it in 1942 as part of a bequest from a woman whose own life was laced with shadows. And now here it was unleashed on a younger royal's wedding day like something impatient to be seen. The emerald did not sparkle with joy. It smoldered, as though it carried every unspoken chapter of ambition, revolution, and quiet royal calculation that had brought it to this exact moment. If the sheer presence of that single stone sent a chill through the chapel, consider what it felt like to the woman who once decided which jewels would define a 70-year reign and which ones would remain sealed in the dark. Hit like if you're drawn to the more shadowed side of royal splendor. Share this with someone who understands that power always carries a hidden cost. And subscribe, because we are about to open vaults that most documentaries never dare approach. London, in the early decades of the 20th century. The city still breathed coal smoke and empire. Society hostesses like Dame Margaret Greville moved through Mayfair drawing rooms with the precision of seasoned generals, not commanding armies, but rooms, conversations, reputations. Born Margaret Anderson in 1863, the illegitimate daughter of a Scottish brewer, she married into money, and then, with remarkable discipline, clawed her way to the highest rungs of Edwardian high society. Her weapon was not birthright. It was relentless, deliberate acquisition. She hosted the powerful, the titled, the strategically useful King Edward VII, are said to be a close personal guest, a detail that opened doors no amount of wealth alone could unlock. And she understood perhaps better than anyone in those gilded rooms that jewelry was never merely decoration. It was armor, currency, declaration. A woman wearing the right stone in the right room could rearrange the architecture of a conversation before she had spoken a word. In 1919, or possibly 1921, the exact records remained conveniently imprecise. She walked into the Parisian atelier of Boucheron and commissioned a tiara designed to stop conversation cold. The Kokoshnik shape drew from Russian imperial tradition, a broad halo built to frame the face like a crown of frozen fire. At its heart sat that enormous Colombian emerald cabochon, cut so its depth seemed to have no bottom, encircled by rose-cut diamonds and graduating emeralds. Platinum setting. Pauve work so refined it resembled liquid metal rather than stone. The piece weighed enough to challenge a lesser woman's posture, yet Greville wore it with the ease of someone who had long since paid every price required to stand in those rooms. She was not alone in her hunger for brilliance. Across Europe, old dynasties and new fortunes waged a silent war of stones. Queen Mary, consort to George V, collected with almost scholarly obsession. She transformed a modest 1,893 diamond brooch, a sentimental gift from the people of Lincolnshire, into a crisp Art Deco bandeau of 11 geometric platinum sections. She commissioned the towering Delhi Durbar tiara in 1911, a circlet heavy with over 2,000 diamonds built specifically for the proclamation of her husband as Emperor of India. What made Queen Mary's collecting instinct unusual was not just its scale, but its methodology. She studied provenance the way a general studies terrain, knowing which pieces could be traced, which carried unresolved histories, and which could be quietly absorbed into the royal collection with minimal scrutiny. Her acquisitions were acts of consolidation as much as admiration. That event in Delhi was pure imperial theater. A tented city for 250 people rose from the dust. Maharajas arrived draped in jewels worth fortunes, and yet even there cracks were already showing. The Gaikwar of Baroda offered only the briefest, most perfunctory bow before turning his back and strolling away, twirling a swagger stick, a gesture British officials labeled seditious. The Durbar celebrated dominance, but the empire had already begun to loosen at its edges. Meanwhile, in the colder north, the Romanov dynasty glittered beneath the full weight of its own magnificence. Empress Maria Feodorovna, born a Danish princess, had married into luxury beyond imagining. When revolution extinguished her world, she escaped with a handful of pieces, among them a sapphire and pearl choker that could be disassembled into bracelets, 4 rows of luminous pearls linked by 20 diamond bars anchored by an angular sapphire clasp. She carried it through exile until her passing in 1928. Her daughters later parted with it out of necessity. Queen Mary acquired it for around £6,000, a fraction of its worth, for something that had survived the final chapter of an empire's collapse. Back in Britain, a young Princess Elizabeth came of age in the shadow of war. In 1944, as rockets fell on London, her mother reached into her own jewelry case and presented her with the delicate Cartier halo tiara for her 18th birthday, 16 softly arching diamond scrolls crafted in 1936. It was a gesture of hope in a city learning to hold its breath. The future queen wore it privately, if at all. Public duty soon replaced the space private moments once occupied. Even then, her taste leaned toward restraint. Long ropes of pearls that elongated the neck, clean lines, symmetry, jewelry that whispered steadiness rather than announced spectacle. She understood early that every stone carried a message, and some messages a modern monarch simply could not afford to send. By the time Elizabeth ascended the throne in 1952, the royal vaults held treasures from multiple eras, each one carrying its own invisible freight. The challenge was not financial. It was curatorial and deeply political. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik had arrived through the Queen Mother's bequest in 1942. Margaret Greville had departed that same year, leaving her entire collection, tiaras, necklaces, even a diamond necklace once rumored to have passed through the hands of Marie Antoinette, to her closest royal confidant. Palace insiders spoke in careful half-sentences about Greville's ascent, the circumstances of her birth, the strategic marriages, the relationships that helped secure her position in rooms that did not naturally welcome women of uncertain origin, the imprecise provenance of certain stones. The tiara's Russian-inspired silhouette deepened the whispers further. In a post-war world, still wary of anything carrying the scent of old European intrigue, it sat heavy with a past no one was eager to examine too closely. Elizabeth inherited it in 2002 when the Queen Mother passed. She never wore it publicly. Not once. The emerald demanded a presence equal to its scale. It carried a kind of voltage that could rewrite the mood of any room, but also shadows that might compromise the carefully managed image of a monarchy rebuilt on duty and continuity after the abdication crisis and the long years of war. The Kent amethyst parure told an older story, one of grief, originating with Queen Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, in the early 19th century. The suite featured large oval and cabochon amethysts, set in gold and diamonds necklace earrings, 3 brooches hair combs. Purple had long been the color of half-mourning in British tradition. Victoria herself wore amethysts through decades of black, following Prince Albert's passing. The stones became inseparable from loss, from penance, from old wounds that resisted closing. Elizabeth brought out the full suite only once during a 1985 state visit to Portugal. Even then, those watching sensed an unease. The deep violet seemed to draw the eye toward sorrow rather than forward motion. Quietly, she reduced the parure for everyday use, stripping the grand necklace back to a simple brooch without its pendant drops. Some jewels carried stories a monarch preferred not to tell in public. The Delhi Durbar tiara embodied a different kind of weight altogether. Commissioned in 1911 by Garrod, it was a towering political statement in gold and diamonds, worn by Queen Mary at the Durbar as a declaration of dominance over an entire subcontinent. Yet that same event unfolded against the long memory of famines and extraction that had preceded it. The spectacle of 100 spectators and bejeweled Maharajas masked a nationalist tension already building beneath the surface. By the time the tiara reached Elizabeth in 2002, the empire had long since dissolved. Wearing it risked evoking colonial weight rather than Commonwealth partnership. She gave it one carefully calculated public appearance in 2005 during a visit to Malta, once an imperial outpost, now an independent nation, acknowledging history without appearing to celebrate it. Then it went back to the vault. Even the seemingly neutral pieces carried their own quiet warnings. The 5 aquamarine tiara had no clear provenance, no donor records, no confirmed date of entry. 5 large oval aquamarines in diamond ribbons and bows, bold, theatrical, modern in its energy. Elizabeth wore it once in 1970 at a state banquet in Yellowknife during a Canadian tour. Then it vanished for over 40 years. Mystery breeds rumor in royal circles. Was it too forward, quietly disassembled, or simply too far outside the visual language she had built for herself? The Japanese pearl choker, a 1970s diplomatic gift of 4 luminous strands with a striking diamond clasp cut across the long vertical silhouette she had spent decades refining. Chokers compressed the neck, disrupted the serene authority projected by long ropes of pearls. She wore it sparingly Bangladesh in 1983, Canada in 1984, before passing it along. The Cartier halo, that youthful wartime gift, no longer suited the image of a woman expected to appear unshakable. The diamond bandeau, with its precise Art Deco geometry, sat untouched in the vaults for 65 years after 1953, as if patiently waiting for a different reign. What is remarkable in hindsight is not the individual decisions, but their consistency. Decade after decade, Elizabeth made the same quiet calculation that the monarchy's survival depended less on what it showed and more on what it withheld. Each piece forced a choice: keep it and risk allowing the past to speak louder than the present, or curate, transfer, and maintain the quiet authority that defined everything she had built. There was no single dramatic rupture, no public scandal that shattered the collection in one blow. The tragedy here was slower, more atmospheric, the gradual recognition that immense inherited wealth never arrives unaccompanied. It always carries the silhouettes of everyone it passed through to reach you. Elizabeth watched as the world shifted around her. Empires dissolved. Revolutions consumed dynasties. Families like the Romanovs saw their entire world extinguished, their jewels scattered to foreign auction rooms or sold quietly to survive. Greville's long ascent left question marks that polite society still sidestepped. Victoria's decades of mourning left purple stones forever shadowed by grief. The Delhi Durbar's magnificent excess now read as tone-deaf in a world that had moved past its justifications. Her response was masterful in its restraint. She did not erase. She did not put everything on display. She simply decided with great precision which stories the monarchy would choose to tell through its jewels. It was, when considered carefully, one of the most sophisticated acts of image management in modern political history, conducted entirely in silence, entirely in stone. The Greville Kokoshnik remained hidden until Eugenie's wedding, where its particular potency finally found a stage worthy of it. The whispers that followed were telling that Meghan had requested it in 2018 and been quietly declined, not because it was unsuitable, but because its layered backstory required a wearer prepared to absorb its full force without inviting the wrong conversation. The Delhi Durbar tiara made its single symbolic appearance and returned to the vault its imperial swagger, too heavy for the modern Commonwealth to carry comfortably. The Kent amethysts were reduced and rarely displayed together, their association with mourning held carefully at arm's length. The wheat ear brooches, 6 diamond stalks, incorporating 580 stones commissioned in 1830 for Queen Adelaide, were simply too unwieldy for a monarch who preferred balance above grandeur. Elizabeth experimented with them as hair slides, as oversized occasional brooches, but they belonged to a louder, more opulent era. It was Eugenie who eventually threaded 3 of them into her hair at her wedding reception, turning cumbersome heirlooms into something that felt unexpectedly alive. The sapphire choker from Maria Feodorovna appeared only once on Elizabeth before moving to Princess Anne, who wore its imperial drama without apology. The Japanese choker and other visually assertive pieces found a better home on Catherine, whose frame and style could carry them without disturbing the vertical authority Elizabeth had spent decades constructing. Even the long-absent 5 aquamarine tiara eventually resurfaced on Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, at royal weddings in Luxembourg and Sweden, its boldness finally paired with a modern aesthetic equal to it. Each transfer was an act of quiet curation, not rejection. Recognition, the understanding that certain jewels had become burdens, not financial ones, but atmospheric ones. Reminders of ambition's cost, empire's unraveling, grief's long, inconvenient persistence. The real fall was not measured in carats or currency. It was the slow, deliberate process of distancing a modern monarchy from anything that risked making it appear weighed down by its own glittering past. Today, the vaults remain full, and slowly, piece by piece, the stones are finding new heads. Camilla in the Greville Kokoshnik at diplomatic events, Catherine in the Japanese choker and the bandeau pieces that once sat untouched for decades, Anne in the meander and the Romanov sapphires, Sophie in the aquamarines that vanished for nearly half a century, each wearing in its own quiet way an act of historical continuation and also an act of inheritance that goes far beyond the physical object. To wear these stones is to absorb their full weight. Every chapter they pass through, every hand that held them before yours. The jewels still carry what they always carried. The emerald still smolders with Greville's ambition and its unresolved Russian echoes. The amethysts still hold the particular stillness of Victorian mourning. The Delhi Durbar tiara still contains the memory of a Durbar, where one Maharaja chose not to bow, a small, defiant gesture, frozen in stone and ceremony. The sapphire choker still carries the chill of a dynasty that did not survive its own century. What Elizabeth left behind was a monarchy that reads as steadier, more restrained, less encumbered by visible spectacle. And yet the stones she locked away prove something that no amount of curation can finally silence. The past does not disappear. It waits. Power is never clean. Every brilliant cut reflects not only light, but the hands that pulled the stone from the earth, the wealth that funded its setting, and the lives rearranged, sometimes beyond recognition, to place it in a royal vault. The heaviest crowns are rarely the ones worn on state occasions. They are the invisible weights embedded in memory, in provenance, in every carat of something that outlasts the person who commissioned it. What price did Elizabeth pay to keep her reign defined by quiet authority rather than inherited spectacle And what stories are the newer royals choosing, or perhaps being compelled to tell each time they lift one of those pieces from the dark and place it on their heads? The vaults are quieter now. But the emeralds still burn. The sapphires still remember. And the diamonds, as always, keep their sharpest secrets. If this story moved you, subscribe before you leave. There are more vaults to open, and the next one is darker still.